Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewing window of Nexus Station and watched the greatest military display in galactic history. Ships from dozens of alien civilizations filled the space around the massive station. Each fleet was more impressive than the last. The Zephyrian Empire had brought 1,000 warships. Their vessels gleamed like silver daggers in the starlight. Each ship was 3 times larger than anything Earth had ever built. Energy weapons glowed along their hulls like angry stars. The crystalline collective's bioships pulsed with living light. These creatures were grown, not built. Each one was the size of a city and could heal from any damage. Their organic hulls shifted colors as they moved through space like giant jellyfish. The luminals didn't even need ships. They were beings made of pure energy who created vessels from compressed light. Their fleet looked like a rainbow of deadly beauty floating in the void. Chen looked down at her tablet showing Earth's contribution to this grand display. 20 ships. That was all humanity could offer. 12 destroyers, 6 cruisers, and 2 battleships. They looked tiny compared to the alien fleets around them. Pathetic, a voice said behind her. Chen turned to see Commander Zaxoth of the Rigelian Navy. The tall, blue-skinned alien looked down at her with 4 eyes that showed clear disgust. Your species has been in space for barely 200 years, Zaxoth continued. You think you can stand with civilizations that have ruled the stars for millions of years? We do our part, Chen replied calmly. Zaxoth made a sound that might have been laughter. Your part? What part is that? Your ships still use chemical rockets. Your weapons fire chunks of metal. My people were building stargates when your ancestors were still living in caves. Other alien officers had gathered around them now. Chen could feel their amusement. To them, humanity was a joke, a primitive species playing at being warriors. Perhaps we should give the humans a special mission, said Hive Queen Zakath. The insectoid leader's voice buzzed with mockery. They could patrol the nursery worlds, keep the children safe while the real warriors handle serious threats. The aliens around them clicked, buzzed, and hummed with what Chen knew was laughter. She kept her face calm, but inside she felt the familiar burn of anger. The humans think they understand war, continued another voice. This came from General Thane, whose people had conquered half their galaxy before joining the Federation. They had a few little conflicts on their homeworld. They think that makes them soldiers. Tell me, Admiral, Zaxoth said, leaning closer. What is the largest battle your people have ever fought? Chen thought carefully before answering. The Battle of Gettysburg involved about 150,000 soldiers. The aliens erupted in what could only be called laughter. Some made choking sounds. Others flashed lights. A few released clouds of colored gas. 150,000? Zaxoth buzzed. My last campaign involved 12 billion warriors across 50 star systems. Your entire species has never seen real war. Perhaps that's true, Chen said quietly. The crowd of aliens began to break up, still making their sounds of amusement. Chen watched them go, her face showing nothing. But her hand moved to the small device hidden in her uniform. A quantum communicator that could reach across the galaxy in seconds. She didn't activate it. Not yet. An hour later, Chen sat in the Federation Council chambers. The great circular room held representatives from 47 different species. At the center, Admiral Korath of the Hegemony spoke about fleet assignments. The threat from the outer rim grows daily, Korath said. His voice echoed through translation devices. Long-range scouts report movement in the dark zones. Something is coming. Chen listened as the Admiral discussed deployment of the Federation's combined fleets. The most dangerous sectors would be protected by the largest, most advanced ships. The core worlds would have multiple layers of defense. As for Earth's fleet, Korath said, his tone clearly dismissive, they will patrol Sector 7. It's a quiet area with 3 peaceful colonies and a trading post. Chen stood up. With respect, Admiral, my ships and crews are ready for any assignment. I'm sure they are, Korath replied. But Sector 7 is perfect for breaking in new allies. Consider it training. More sounds of alien amusement filled the chamber. Chen sat down without another word. After the meeting, she walked alone through the station's corridors. Nexus Station was a marvel of alien engineering. It housed millions of beings and served as the Federation's military headquarters. But Chen couldn't shake the feeling that it was also a monument to complacency. These aliens had lived in peace for so long, they had forgotten what real war looked like. They measured strength by the size of their fleets and the power of their weapons. They thought bigger was always better. Chen reached her quarters and activated her personal computer. The screen showed Earth's small fleet floating near the station. Her ships looked primitive compared to the alien vessels around them. Gray metal hulls instead of gleaming crystal, simple designs instead of flowing organic curves. But Chen knew something the aliens didn't. Those ships carried crews who had been fighting wars their entire lives. Not the grand, civilized conflicts the Federation knew, but brutal, desperate battles where losing meant extinction. Her door chimed. "Enter," she called. Captain Martinez, her chief of staff, stepped inside. "The crew is asking questions, Admiral. They know the other species look down on us." "Let them look down," Chen said. "It doesn't change what we are." "And what are we, Admiral?" Chen turned to face him. Martinez was young for a ship captain, but he had the eyes of someone who had seen too much combat. Most of her officers did. "We're survivors, Captain. These aliens have been protected by distance and luck for thousands of years. They've never faced real darkness, never had to make the hard choices, but we have." Chen nodded. "More than they know, more than they can imagine." She walked to her private safe and pulled out a small device. It looked simple, almost primitive. But Martinez recognized it immediately. "Every senior Earth officer did. Is it time?" he asked quietly. "Not yet," Chen replied. "But soon. The scouts are reporting movement in the dark zones. Something is stirring out there. Something the Federation has never seen before. And if they can't stop it?" Chen looked out her window at the alien fleets. Beautiful, powerful, and completely unprepared for what was coming. "Then they'll learn what human warfare really looks like," she said. That night, Chen couldn't sleep. She stood at her window watching the alien ships conduct practice maneuvers. They moved in perfect formations, firing their weapons at holographic targets. Everything was precise, clean, efficient. They had no idea what chaos looked like. They had never fought an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond. Never faced a threat that turned their own strengths against them. Chen thought about the classified reports sitting in her personal files. Intelligence gathered by ships that officially didn't exist. Data collected from regions of space that weren't supposed to be explored. Something was coming from the dark zones. Something that had consumed entire galaxies before turning its attention to their small corner of the universe. The Federation's advanced technology and massive fleets wouldn't save them. Chen was certain of that, but humanity might, if the price was right. If the galaxy was finally ready to see what Earth had been hiding, Chen activated her personal log and began to record her thoughts. Future historians would want to know how it all began. How the galaxy learned that size wasn't everything. How they discovered that sometimes the smallest force represented the greatest strength. Outside her window, the alien fleets continued their beautiful, useless practice. Inside her quarters, Admiral Sarah Chen prepared for the war that would change everything. 6 months had passed since the military review at Nexus Station. Admiral Chen's small human fleet patrolled Sector 7 as ordered. 3 peaceful colonies and a trading post, just as boring as the Federation had promised. Chen was reviewing supply reports when her communications officer called out. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Federation Command." "Put it through." Admiral Koreth's image appeared on the main screen. The alien leader looked worried for the first time since Chen had known him. "All fleet commanders, this is an emergency alert. Long-range sensors have detected a massive force approaching from the dark zones. Size unknown. Origin unknown. All ships are to report to the Helix Nebula immediately." The transmission ended. Chen's bridge fell silent. The dark zones were regions of space that couldn't be scanned properly. Strange things happened there. Ships that went in rarely came out. "Set course for the Helix Nebula," Chen ordered. "Maximum speed." "Aye, Admiral." As Earth's small fleet jumped to hyperspace, Chen wondered what they would find. The Federation didn't call emergency alerts unless something was seriously wrong. They arrived at the Helix Nebula 12 hours later. Chen had never seen so many ships in one place. The combined Federation fleet filled space for thousands of kilometers. Over 10,000 vessels from 47 different species. The Zephyrian Empire had brought their entire war fleet. 1,000 silver ships arranged in perfect battle formations. The crystalline collective's bioships pulsed with nervous energy. Even the normally calm luminals seemed agitated, their energy forms flickering rapidly. Chen's small fleet took position at the rear of the formation. Nobody bothered to assign them a specific location. 20 ships among 10,000 didn't matter. What do the sensors show? Chen asked her science officer. Long-range scans are picking up massive gravitational disturbances at the edge of the system. Whatever's coming, it's big. How big? I can't get a clear reading, Admiral. The disturbances are interfering with our instruments. On the main screen, Admiral Korath was addressing the combined fleet. His usually confident voice carried a note of uncertainty. Fellow commanders, we face an unknown threat from beyond our galaxy. Our deep space monitoring stations detected this force 6 days ago. It has consumed everything in its path. 3 star systems have gone dark. No survivors. No wreckage, nothing. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. 3 star systems meant billions of lives. The enemy appears to be a single massive swarm of biomechanical ships. Our analysts believe they are controlled by a hive mind. They adapt quickly to any threat. But we have the finest military technology in known space. We will stop them here. The transmission ended. Around them, the alien fleets began final preparations. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Formation leaders gave last-minute orders to their squadrons. Admiral, Chen's tactical officer called out. I'm detecting energy signatures at the edge of sensor range. Show me. The main screen switched to long-range sensors. At first, Chen saw nothing but empty space. Then the darkness began to move. Ships emerged from the void. But these weren't like any vessels Chen had ever seen. They looked alive. Organic curves mixed with mechanical components. Each one was massive, easily 10 times larger than the biggest Federation. Battleship, my God, someone whispered. More ships appeared. Hundreds. Thousands. They kept coming until the edge of the system was filled with an alien swarm unlike anything in Federation. Records, all ships, this is Admiral Korath. The enemy has arrived. All vessels engage at maximum range. Fire at will. The Federation fleet opened fire. 10,000 ships unleashed everything they had. Quantum disruptors carved through space. Reality-warping weapons bent the laws of physics. Energy beams that could melt planets reached out toward the swarm. The weapons struck home. Explosions lit up the darkness as enemy ships took damage. For a moment, Chen thought the Federation might actually win. Then the swarm began to adapt. The quantum disruptors fired again, but this time the enemy ships absorbed the energy. The biomechanical hulls shifted and changed, developing immunity to weapons that had been hitting them moments before. This is impossible, Chen's weapons officer said. They're adapting faster than we can fire. The swarm moved forward. Not in the organized formations the Federation used, but like a living thing. A plague of ships that flowed around obstacles and reformed when damaged. The first Federation ships died quickly. Zephyrian destroyers simply stopped existing as the swarm's weapons touched them. Crystalline bioships screamed across all frequencies as they were consumed by something even more organic than themselves. All ships, fall back to defensive positions, Korath ordered. But his voice was already showing strain. The swarm didn't just destroy Federation ships. It absorbed them. Pieces of destroyed vessels were pulled into the alien hulls and integrated. The swarm was growing stronger with every victory. Chen watched in horror as the luminal energy beings simply vanished. Thousands of years of evolved consciousness snuffed out in seconds. The swarm's biomechanical ships pulsed with new energy patterns, adding luminal technology to their arsenal. Admiral, we're receiving retreat orders, her communications officer reported. From who? Everyone, ma'am. The entire Federation fleet is pulling back. Chen looked at her tactical display. In just 4 hours, 10,000 ships had been reduced to scattered survivors. The greatest military force in galactic history was running away. Set course for the retreat vector, Chen ordered. But slowly. Let the others get ahead of us, ma'am. Do it. As her small fleet fell back with the other survivors, Chen activated her personal communicator. The small device hidden in her uniform came to life. She entered a series of codes that she had memorized years ago but never used. The codes connected her to a quantum communication network that officially didn't exist. Her message would travel instantly across space to coordinates that no alien had ever detected. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth Fleet Command. She spoke quietly into the device. Humanity Omega Protocol. Authorization, blood and iron, execute immediately. She ended the transmission and put the device away. Around her, the bridge crew continued their duties. They didn't know what she had just done. They didn't need to know. Not yet. Admiral, her sensor officer called out. The swarm has stopped pursuing. They're consolidating their position. Chen nodded. The enemy was probably analyzing their new acquisitions, learning from the Federation technology they had absorbed. Growing stronger. Time to Federation core worlds? At current speed, the swarm could reach them in 6 days. 6 days. Chen thought about the billions of civilians who had no idea what was coming. The Federation had believed their military was invincible. They were about to learn how wrong they were. But Chen knew something the Federation didn't. Something the swarm didn't either. Humanity had been fighting wars like this for longer than most species had existed. Not the clean, civilized conflicts the Federation practiced, but brutal survival wars against enemies that adapted and evolved. Earth's 20 ships weren't their real military. They weren't even close. Chen looked out at the stars and wondered how long it would take for her message to reach its destination. The quantum communicator could send signals instantly, but the forces she had contacted were very far away, hidden in the dark spaces between galaxies, waiting for orders that Chen had hoped would never come. Admiral. Incoming transmission from Admiral Korath. Put it through. Korath's image appeared, but he looked nothing like the confident leader from the military review. His face showed exhaustion and defeat. All surviving ships are to regroup at Sanctuary Station. We need time to analyze what we're facing and plan our next move. Understood, Chen replied. But privately she knew the Federation wouldn't have time for analysis or planning. The swarm would give them 6 days at most before the next attack. And when it came, the aliens would learn that their advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that could turn their own weapons against them, unless Chen's message had reached its destination in time. Unless humanity's real fleet was already moving. Unless the galaxy was finally ready to see what Earth had been hiding in the darkness between the stars. The survivors of the Federation fleet gathered at Sanctuary Station like wounded animals seeking shelter. What had once been the most powerful military force in galactic history was now barely 3,000 ships. Most were damaged. All were demoralized. Admiral Chen walked through the station's corridors and saw the faces of defeat everywhere. Alien officers who had never known failure sat in stunned silence. Species that had ruled space for millions of years now questioned everything they believed about warfare. The emergency council meeting was chaos. Representatives shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up with the angry voices. The swarm consumed our quantum disruptors, General Thane was saying, absorbed them and made them stronger. How do we fight an enemy that turns our own weapons against us? We need to evacuate the core worlds, suggested Commander Zaxoth. Get the civilians to safety while we figure out a new strategy. Evacuate to where? Hive Queen Zaxth buzzed angrily. The swarm moves faster than our fastest ships. There is nowhere to run. Admiral Korath sat at the center of the chaos, looking like he had aged years in the past few days. His confident leadership had crumbled along with his fleet. What about the weapon caches? Someone suggested. The emergency arsenals we built after the Vorthon War? Already considered, Korath replied. But those weapons use the same principles as what we just lost. The swarm will adapt to them just as quickly. Chen listened to the desperate planning and felt a familiar sadness. These aliens had lived in peace for so long they had forgotten what real war looked like. They thought technology could solve everything. They believed superior firepower guaranteed victory. They had never fought an enemy that evolved faster than they could adapt. Never faced a threat that learned from every attack and grew stronger. The Federation's biggest weakness wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their inexperience with true survival warfare. Admiral Chen, Korath called out suddenly, your species has a reputation for creative solutions to military problems. What do you suggest? The council chamber fell silent. Dozens of alien eyes turned to look at the human representative. Chen could see the mix of emotions on their faces. Desperation, hope, and still, underneath it all, the assumption that primitive humans couldn't possibly have answers that advanced aliens had missed. We could try to communicate with them, Chen said carefully. The suggestion caused an uproar. Several aliens began speaking at once. Communicate? Zaxoth sputtered. They've consumed 3 star systems. What is there to discuss? The swarm is clearly a hive mind, Zaxoth added. They understand only hunger and growth. There can be no reasoning with them. Chen held up her hand for silence. You're probably right, but it might buy us time to prepare better defenses. Time for what? Korath asked. We threw everything we had at them. Our most advanced weapons were useless. What could we possibly prepare that would make a difference? Chen didn't answer directly. Instead, she activated her personal tablet and called up a star chart. The swarm is moving toward the core worlds along this vector, she said, highlighting their projected path. They'll reach the outer colonies in 4 days. The core worlds 2 days after that. We know this already, General Thane growled. But look at their formation, Chen continued. They're not spreading out to cover multiple targets. They're staying concentrated, moving as a single massive force, so they're confident. They don't think we can threaten them anymore. That might be a weakness we can exploit. The aliens looked at the star chart with new interest. For the first time since the battle, some of them seemed to have hope. What kind of exploitation? Korath asked. Chen hesitated. She was walking a dangerous line. Too much information and the aliens might ask questions she couldn't answer. Too little and they might not give her the time she needed. Concentrated forces are powerful, she said finally, but they're also vulnerable to the right kind of attack. If we could find a way to disrupt their hive mind communication— Impossible, Zaxoth interrupted. We don't understand their technology well enough. Maybe, Chen agreed. But it's worth trying. Give me permission to take my fleet on a reconnaissance mission. Let me get close enough to study their communication patterns. The council chamber erupted again. Most of the aliens thought it was suicide. A few seemed interested in the idea of learning more about their enemy. Your 20 ships against a force that destroyed 10,000? Korath shook his head. Admiral Chen, I respect your courage, but this would accomplish nothing except adding your ships to the enemy's strength. Perhaps, Chen said. But human ships use different technology than yours. Maybe the swarm won't adapt to us as quickly. That was partially true. Earth's ships did use different technology. Simpler technology that was harder to adapt to because it was already so basic. But that wasn't the real reason Chen wanted to get close to the swarm. She needed to confirm what her hidden sensors had detected during the battle. Information that she couldn't share with the Federation. Data that would determine whether her desperate message had been received. After an hour of debate, the Council agreed to let her try. They had no other options. The Federation's remaining ships would fortify the core worlds while Chen's small fleet attempted their reconnaissance mission. This is likely a suicide mission. Korath warned her privately after the meeting. Are you certain about this? Nothing is certain in war, Chen replied. But sometimes you have to take risks. 3 hours later, Earth's 20 ships left Sanctuary Station. Chen's fleet was even smaller now. One of her destroyers had been too damaged in the retreat to continue. 19 ships against an enemy that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. As they jumped to hyperspace, Chen gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. Captain Martinez, her chief of staff, Commander Johnson, her tactical officer, Major Walsh from the Marines, all of them veterans of conflicts the Federation had never heard of. Sir, Martinez said once the door was closed. The crew is asking questions. They know this mission doesn't make sense from a tactical standpoint. Chen nodded. She had expected this. What you're about to hear doesn't leave this room, she said. The reconnaissance mission is cover. We're not going to study the swarm's communications. Then what are we doing? Commander Johnson asked. Chen pulled out her hidden communicator and placed it on the table. All of her officers recognized the device immediately. I sent an Omega Protocol message 6 days ago. We're going to verify whether it was received. The room fell silent. The Omega Protocol was humanity's deepest secret, the final option that they all hoped would never be used. Are you sure it's necessary? Major Walsh asked quietly. Look at the tactical reports, Chen replied. The Federation's most advanced weapons were useless. The swarm adapted to everything they tried. This enemy is unlike anything the galaxy has seen before. And you think our other assets can handle it? I think they're our only chance. Chen activated the communicator and began entering coordinates. Not for the swarm's location, but for a region of empty space between galaxies, a place where no Federation ship had ever traveled. If the protocol was activated, there should be signs by now. Gravitational anomalies, energy signatures, changes in background radiation. And if there aren't any signs? Martinez asked. Chen didn't answer immediately. If there were no signs, it meant humanity's secret fleet was either destroyed or unable to respond. It meant the galaxy would fall to the swarm with no hope of salvation. Then we'll know where we stand, she said finally. The ship jumped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system where the swarm was consolidating. Chen's sensors immediately began scanning for the enemy force. They found it easily. Hundreds of thousands of biomechanical ships arranged in loose clusters throughout the system. But Chen wasn't looking at the swarm. Her attention was focused on the long-range sensors pointed toward empty space. "Anything?" she asked her science officer. "Scanning. Wait. Admiral, I'm detecting gravitational fluctuations about 50 light-years from here. Something big is moving through hyperspace." Chen felt her heart rate increase. Gravitational fluctuations could mean anything. But they could also mean that her message had been received. "Size estimate? I can't get accurate readings at this distance. But whatever it is, it's massive." "How massive?" The science officer checked his instruments again. "Admiral, if these readings are correct, we're looking at something larger than a planet." Chen smiled for the first time in days. The Federation thought Earth's 20 ships were humanity's entire military contribution. They had no idea what was really coming. "Set course for those gravitational anomalies," she ordered. "Maximum speed." "Ma'am, that will take us away from the swarm." "I know." As Earth's small fleet jumped to hyperspace, Chen thought about what the Federation would learn in the next few days. They would discover that size wasn't everything in warfare. They would learn that sometimes the smallest visible force represented the largest hidden strength. Most importantly, they would finally understand what humanity really was. Not a primitive species playing at being warriors, but the galaxy's oldest guardians. Protectors who had been fighting cosmic horrors since before most civilizations had learned to use fire. The swarm thought it had already won. Admiral Chen's small fleet emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates where her sensors had detected gravitational anomalies. At first, her crew saw nothing but empty space. The nearest star was a dim point of light 12 light-years away. "Sensors show nothing, Admiral," her science officer reported. "Just background radiation and cosmic dust." Chen frowned. The gravitational readings had been clear. Something massive had been moving through this region. "But now, wait," the science officer called out suddenly. "I'm getting temperature readings. The local space is getting colder." "How much colder?" "Dropping fast. Background radiation is shifting too. Something is absorbing energy from the entire region." Chen stared at the main screen showing empty space. But was it really empty? Or was something so large that they couldn't see it properly? "All ships activate deep space scanners," she ordered. Maximum range and sensitivity. The 19 ships of Earth's fleet spread out in a search pattern. Their sensors probed the darkness for any sign of what had caused the gravitational disturbances. "Contact," one of her destroyer captains called out over the comm. "Bearing 27 Mark 4 distance. I can't get an accurate reading." "What do you mean you can't get a reading?" "Admiral, the object is so large that our sensors can't find its edges. It's like trying to measure a mountain when you're standing on it." Chen felt her pulse quicken. This was what she had been hoping for. What she had been praying for since sending her desperate message. All ships converge on that bearing. But slowly. Whatever's out there, we don't want to surprise it. As her fleet moved toward the contact, more reports came in from other ships. The temperature continued dropping. Strange energy patterns flickered at the edge of sensor range. Space itself seemed to be warping around something invisible. Then the stars began to disappear. Not all at once, but one by one, as if something vast was moving between Chen's fleet and the distant suns. Something so big that it blocked out the light from multiple star systems. "My God," someone whispered over the comm. A shadow fell across Chen's fleet, not the shadow of a ship, but of something that defied understanding. The darkness was so complete that it seemed solid, a wall of black that stretched in every direction. "Admiral," her tactical officer said in a shaky voice, "I'm reading artificial structures, hull plating, weapon emplacements. But the scale, it's impossible. Give me numbers." "The object is roughly 8,000 kilometers long, 4,000 kilometers wide, and 2,000 kilometers thick. It's not a ship, Admiral. It's a mobile battle station the size of a small planet." Chen closed her eyes and felt relief flood through her. The Omega Protocol had worked. Humanity's greatest secret was here. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies. Channel open, Admiral. UES Indomitable, this is Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Fleet, requesting permission to come aboard." The response came immediately, a voice that Chen recognized even though she hadn't heard it in 20 years. "Permission granted. Admiral Chen, welcome to the real war." The massive battle station's docking bay was larger than most space stations. Chen's flagship looked like a toy as it settled onto the deck. Around them, the bay stretched for kilometers in every direction. Chen walked down the ramp and saw him waiting for her. Admiral Marcus Kane, commander of humanity's secret fleet. He looked older than she remembered, his hair completely gray now, but his eyes still held the same hard intelligence that had made him legendary among Earth's military. "Hello, Sarah," he said simply. "Marcus." Chen looked around the enormous docking bay. "I wasn't sure you'd come. When the Omega Protocol activates, we come. That's the deal we made with Earth Command 50 years ago. How long have you been out here?" Kane smiled grimly. "Define out here. We've been fighting in the spaces between galaxies for over 2 centuries. Places where the Federation's long-range sensors can't reach, against enemies they can't imagine. Like the Swarm? The Draktar Swarm is actually one of the smaller threats we've dealt with. They consumed 3 galaxies before we stopped their advance. That was about 50 years ago." Chen stared at him. "You fought them before?" "Fought them, studied them, learned their weaknesses. They're dangerous but predictable. Hive minds always are once you understand their patterns." Kane led her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The Indomitable was more than just a ship. It was a mobile city designed for century-long campaigns in deep space. "How many ships do you have?" Chen asked. "For this operation?" "About 12,000. We left the rest to guard the outer perimeter." 12,000 ships like this one? "Oh no," Kane laughed. "The Indomitable is unique. Most of our fleet consists of smaller vessels. Dreadnoughts about the size of Federation battleships, heavy cruisers, destroyers, the usual mix. They entered a command center that was larger than some Federation space stations. Holographic displays showed tactical information from across 3 galaxies. Chen recognized some of the data as intelligence about the Draktar Swarm. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "We weren't planning anything," Kane replied. "We were hoping we'd never have to reveal ourselves. But when the Swarm broke through the containment barriers we built 50 years ago, we knew it was only a matter of time." Kane activated a holographic display showing the current galaxy. Red markers indicated the Swarm's location and projected path. Blue markers showed Federation positions. "The Federation did better than we expected," he admitted. "Their combined fleet actually damaged the Swarm before being destroyed. That wasn't supposed to be possible, but not enough to stop them. No. The Swarm lost maybe 10% of their force. They'll regenerate those losses within days by consuming the wreckage." Chen studied the tactical display. "So what's the plan?" Kane smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "We're going to show them what human warfare really looks like." He activated another display, this one showing the space around the current star system. Chen saw her small fleet near the Indomitable. But there were other contacts appearing on the screen. Lots of them. "Your 19 ships aren't alone anymore," Kane said. As Chen watched, the sensor display filled with new contacts. Ships were emerging from hyperspace all around them. Not just a few ships, but hundreds. Then thousands. Dreadnought Squadron 7, reporting for duty. Heavy Cruiser Group Delta, in position. Destroyer Flotilla 16 through 22, standing by. The communications board lit up with check-ins from incoming vessels. Chen watched in amazement as humanity's real fleet assembled around them. These weren't the simple metal ships of Earth's diplomatic fleet. These vessels were scarred with battle damage from conflicts that spanned centuries. Their hulls were black as space itself, designed to be invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. "How did you keep this secret?" Chen asked. "The same way we kept everything else secret. By fighting wars in places the Federation doesn't look. By building ships in asteroid fields they've never explored. By recruiting crews from colonies that officially don't exist." Kane pulled up another display showing the crew roster of just one ship. Chen saw names from dozens of human colonies scattered across 3 galaxies, places that the Federation had never heard of. "We've been preparing for this war for 200 years, Kane continued. "Building ships, training crews, learning everything we could about cosmic-level threats. And the Federation never suspected? Why would they? Earth sends them 20 ships and some polite diplomats. They assume that's all humanity has to offer. They never bothered to scan the deep space territories we claimed." Chen nodded. It made sense. The Federation focused on the civilized parts of the galaxy. They ignored the dangerous regions where humans had quietly built their real empire. "Admiral," Kane's tactical officer called out. "All ships report ready. 12,000 vessels standing by for orders." Kane looked at Chen. "This is your operation, Admiral. You sent the Omega Protocol signal. That makes you the senior Federation representative." Chen felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. She was about to order humanity's secret fleet into battle against an enemy that had destroyed the greatest military force in galactic history. "What about the Federation?" she asked. "Do we tell them we're coming?" Kane shook his head. "Not yet. They're not ready to see this. Let them think their primitive human allies are still conducting reconnaissance. When this is over, we'll decide how much to reveal." Chen looked at the tactical display one more time. 12,000 ships against hundreds of thousands. But these weren't Federation vessels with their advanced technology and clean tactics. These were human warships built for the kind of brutal survival warfare that the galaxy had forgotten existed. "All ships," she said into the communication system. "This is Admiral Chen. Set course for the Draktar swarm, maximum speed. It's time to remind the galaxy what humans are really capable of." As humanity's secret fleet jumped to hyperspace, the space around the Indomitable became empty again. But the temperature remained cold and the stars stayed dim. The sky had gone dark with human ships and the galaxy would never be the same. The Draktar swarm had spread throughout the star system like a living plague. Hundreds of thousands of biomechanical ships consumed the wreckage of the Federation fleet, growing stronger with each piece of absorbed technology. The hive mind was confident. No force in this galaxy could threaten them now. Then space began to change. At first, the swarm's sensors detected only minor gravitational fluctuations. Background radiation shifted slightly. The temperature of local space dropped by a few degrees. Nothing that seemed threatening. The hive mind paid little attention to these anomalies. They were focused on integrating the new technology they had absorbed. Federation quantum disruptors were being rebuilt into their ship hulls. Crystalline biotechnology was merging with their own organic systems, but the gravitational fluctuations grew stronger. The temperature continued dropping, and then the stars began to disappear. One by one, distant suns vanished from view. Not destroyed, but blocked by something massive moving through space. The swarm's long-range sensors tried to identify the source of the interference, but found nothing. That should have been their first warning, Admiral. Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable and watched the tactical display. 12,000 human ships moved through hyperspace in perfect formation. Not the rigid geometric patterns the Federation used, but flowing arrangements that could adapt instantly to changing conditions. "Emergence in 30 seconds, the navigation officer reported. "All ships, prepare for combat," Admiral Kane announced over the fleet communications. "Remember, this enemy adapts to conventional tactics. Stay fluid, stay unpredictable." Chen studied the battle plan one more time. It wasn't like anything the Federation would have attempted. No grand formations or coordinated volleys. Instead, humanity's fleet would emerge at multiple points around the system and attack in seemingly random patterns. 10 seconds. "Execute," Chen ordered. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. They didn't appear in one location like the Federation had done. Instead, small groups of ships materialized throughout the star system. Some emerged behind the swarm. Others appeared at the edges of sensor range. A few came out of hyperspace directly in the middle of enemy formations. The Draktar hive mind was confused. This wasn't how civilized species fought. Where were the battle lines? The organized formations? The coordinated attack patterns? Human ships opened fire with weapons the swarm had never seen before. Not the clean energy beams of Federation technology, but brutal kinetic weapons that tore through space like angry fists, gravity lances that could crack moons, quantum torpedoes that unraveled matter at the subatomic level, but most importantly, weapons that couldn't be easily adapted to. The swarm tried to absorb a gravity lance hit and found their biomechanical hull simply torn apart. They attempted to integrate quantum torpedo technology and discovered it destroyed their organic components. These weren't the sophisticated weapons of the Federation. They were crude, brutal, and completely alien to the swarm's experience. "First blood to humanity," Kane announced with satisfaction as swarm ships began exploding throughout the system. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. The swarm would adapt, just as they had to Federation weapons. The key was to keep changing tactics faster than the enemy could respond. "All ships execute pattern Delta 7, she ordered. The human fleet scattered. Individual ships and small squadrons broke off to engage separate parts of the swarm. No two groups used the same approach. Some attacked with massed kinetic fire. Others used exotic weapons that warped space itself. A few squadrons simply rammed their ships into enemy vessels, their crews teleporting to safety at the last second. The Draktar hive mind tried desperately to understand what it was facing. These weren't the predictable patterns of civilized warfare. This was chaos. Beautiful, deadly chaos that seemed to have no logic or structure. Every time the swarm began to adapt to one human tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. Ships that had been firing kinetic weapons suddenly deployed quantum mines. Squadrons that had been attacking in formation scattered to fight as individuals. Vessels that had been engaging at long range closed to point-blank distance without warning. "They're not following any doctrine we understand," the Indomitable's tactical officer reported. "It's like they're making up new strategies in real time." "That's exactly what we're doing," Kane replied. "The Federation fights like they're playing chess. We fight like we're in a street brawl." Chen watched as human ships tore through swarm formations with an efficiency that the Federation had never achieved. These crews had been fighting cosmic horrors for centuries. They knew how to adapt faster than their enemies could respond. But the real surprise came when the Indomitable itself entered the battle. The massive battle station's main weapon was something the galaxy had never seen before. Not a single devastating beam, but a gravity lance that could reach across an entire star system. When it fired, space itself seemed to scream. The weapon carved through the swarm's flagship creatures like they were made of paper. Biomechanical ships that had been the size of cities simply ceased to exist. The gravitational disruption was so intense that nearby vessels were pulled apart by tidal forces. "Target the hive nodes," Chen ordered. "Disrupt their command structure." Human ships concentrated their fire on the largest swarm vessels. These were the nodes that coordinated the hive mind's activities. Without them, the swarm would lose cohesion and become vulnerable. But destroying the nodes required getting close to the most heavily defended parts of the enemy fleet. That's when humanity showed what they were really capable of. Marine assault ships launched from the human fleet, not to capture enemy vessels but to board them and plant quantum charges. Human soldiers teleported directly onto swarm ships and fought hand-to-hand against creatures that had consumed 3 galaxies. Major Walsh led one of these boarding parties. She materialized on the bridge of a swarm hive node with 50 Marines behind her. The organic corridors pulsed with alien life. Biomechanical creatures that were part ship, part living organism attacked immediately. But the Marines had fought worse things in the spaces between galaxies. "Plant the charges and get out," Walsh ordered. "We've got 5 minutes before this thing adapts to our presence." The Marines fought their way through passages that seemed to reshape themselves as they moved. Walls that tried to trap them. Floors that attempted to digest them. Ceilings that dropped acidic compounds. But they had trained for this. Every Marine in the human fleet had experience fighting in environments that actively tried to kill them. The swarm ship was dangerous, but it was also predictable. They planted quantum charges throughout the vessel's critical systems and teleported back to their assault ship just as the explosives detonated. The hive node came apart from the inside, its organic structure unable to contain the quantum disruption. Similar actions played out across the battlefield. Human forces used tactics that the swarm couldn't understand or counter. They fought with a brutality that came from centuries of survival warfare against impossible odds. "Swarm cohesion is breaking down," the Indomitable's sensor officer reported. "They're losing coordination between fleet elements." Chen nodded. Without their hive nodes, the swarm was just a collection of individual ships, still dangerous but no longer the unified threat that had destroyed the Federation fleet. "All ships execute final pattern," she announced. "Finish them!" The human fleet converged on the remaining swarm vessels with devastating efficiency. Ships that had been scattered throughout the system reformed into attack groups. The chaotic battle became a systematic elimination of everything that remained. But Chen knew the most important part was yet to come. The swarm would try to escape. They would attempt to retreat to dark space and regenerate their losses. That couldn't be allowed to happen. "Deploy the containment field," Kane ordered. The Indomitable and several other massive vessels activated weapons that the Federation didn't even have theories about. Space itself became solid around the star system, trapping the surviving swarm ships in a cage made of warped reality. The last Draktar vessels tried desperately to break through the containment field. They threw everything they had at the barrier, but it held firm. Human technology wasn't just more advanced than what the Federation used. It was based on completely different principles. Containment holding, the tactical officer reported. No enemy vessels escaping. Chen watched as the final swarm ships were destroyed. In less than 6 hours, humanity had accomplished what the Federation's greatest fleet couldn't do. They had completely eliminated a threat that had consumed 3 galaxies. All ships stand down from combat alert, she announced. Prepare for fleet reorganization. As the human ships began to regroup, Kane activated the communication system. Admiral Chen, on behalf of humanity's deep space fleet, congratulations on a successful operation. The Draktar swarm has been eliminated. Thank you, Admiral Kane. What's our next move? Kane was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of hidden warfare. Now we decide how much to tell the Federation. They've seen what human ships can do when we're serious. The question is whether they're ready to learn the truth about what we've been protecting them from.